And we are live, and I almost hate to go live because that's genuinely one of the best thumbnails I've ever put together. What it lacks in quality from me, it makes up for in quality of the beautiful Witcher family that we're never going to see again after the end of the season. Wah, wah. I am so happy to be joined by Carey and Kate, and let me tell you, I edited, I trimmed down the agenda this week because I wanted to make sure we would have enough time to talk about the Supes Lo finale, season finale, not series finale, just to be clear, and the first half of season 3 of The Witcher, which is kind of the last season of The Witcher and also kind of not. It's the worst of both worlds. Before we dive into that, Kate and Carey, how are you? And do you bring any news to us this week?
I am doing fantastic. I don't think I have any news. Maybe it'll hit me later.
All right.
I'm good. I have some news that I'm sure we've all heard of because we don't live on a rocks. The Superman casting has been announced, so it's officially David Cornsweet. We're gonna guess that's how you say that, as well as Rachel Mahassan from Mrs. Maisel. There's like tons of articles reading about like who else could have been, and I'm glad with who we got. But it's interesting the different types of movies that I could easily see all the other possible actors have played, which is a really interesting topic that if we had more time, I think we could have talked about. But we have a lot to talk about today. And the other bit of news is we have like just a slim little peek of with Better Cards and Stephen Amell are going to be in a movie together. Thing about it, no other information about it except that she's going to be playing Calamity Jane and he's going to be Wild Bill. Craziness. Have no further comments than that, and I'm so excited to see it.
One thing about me, Kate and Carey, is that I'm here for a long time, not a good time. When I make it through a drought, I always get fed in the end. And we're about to get fed, and maybe it's going to be through like 2 minutes of, one of them killing the other. And I think they're playing like husband and wife or something, but he's only there for like 20 seconds. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I'm so thrilled that we're going to get to see them interact on screen. I think it's going to be incredible. We know it's not, it can't be anything but good. It just can't. I'm thrilled. The other thing I did want to mention is we heard the news that Greta Gerwig, the director of Lady Bird, Little Woman, a bunch of other things, the Barbie movie, is going to be the director for the new like Netflix adaptation, like series of movies for Chronicles of Narnia. I'm thrilled. I think this is going to result in justice for Susan Pevensey, and I'm beside myself. The only problem, and the problem everybody's pointing out, is that the early 2000s adaptation of these movies was in fact perfect, but I'm thrilled to see somebody else take a shot at it in the same way that I was thrilled to see somebody else take a shot at Anne of Green Gables, Anne with an E, like do something different with the same concept, like there's more stuff to unpack there in C.S. Lewis's religious trauma. So excited. Great, fantastic. So we're going to move on to Superman and Lois, the season finale. Oh, there's the delayed laugh. You all remember that Kate's on the 30-second delay. There's the laugh about the joke. I made a second. Fantastic. Superman and Lois, season finale. Carey, kick us off. What are your thoughts?
Here's the funny thing about it, right? I really, really, really like the episode. I had a good time watching the episode, right? But based on what an episode is supposed to do, it's supposed to have an ending. This thing didn't have an ending. They just they just stopped, right? So based on that, for a finale, which could have been a series finale, it feels like a really, really, really big, like, matzo ball on their face. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like it could have easily been the biggest disappointment in the history of the Arrowverse ending the series like that. But fortunately, we get a season four. We get to see how this thing gets resolved. But I say all that to say, I know you didn't ask for a rating, but I thought this was like a 9.5. It was cool to watch it. And I guess the best thing about the episode is usually in season finales for most shows, what you get is a whole bunch of action in like the first 10, 15 minutes. And then you spend the rest of the episode having sort of like, the denouement, basically what happened after that, how are people feeling and that sort of thing based on what they all just went through. This one said, you know what, we're going to flip it. And they had all of the human elements of the episode, all of the emotional elements of the episode, like in the first half. And
Mhm.
then like the last 10, 15 minutes was nothing but nonstop action, um, with a villain character who has been in another television show, been featured in a movie, and here we are lowly on the CW, and I think it looked and felt better on this show than I've seen it in any other property, at least live action. So I say all that to say it was freaking fantastic. It was a big ass gamble, and they get rewarded for it, thankfully, as we do the audience. But man, that was a freaking risk.
It was
What do you
quite
think?
a lot to pack into 1 hour. As I was thinking back through the key sort of emotional beats of the episode, conflict beats, whatever, we have obviously a baby, an engagement, a villain creating a monster, fighting a monster, monster comes back to life, cliffhanger ending. Who could possibly win? We have Superman and Lois running off to have sex in Italy. We have a potential move. We have a job offer. You see, Kate perked up at one of the things I said. I saw that too. We see the teens trying to resolve, I still like you, but also I hate you, but I don't like you. But can we move to, the DOD job so I can be closer to my Romeo and Juliet boyfriend, which, like, all for that, whatever. There's just a lot of key moments that they packed into one episode. And what's interesting is they didn't have a lack of key moments throughout this whole season. It's not like they backloaded everything and no plot moves forward until the final episode, because we've all seen that, right? Those seasons where it's like nothing happens and they're like, oh, a bunch of stuff is going to happen at the end, and it's like it happens in the last episode and feels very non-rewarding. A lot happened this season, but that was a huge, like, plot heavy episode towards the end. So I kind of understand them not wrapping up the fight. It didn't necessarily leave us with a cliffhanger, I don't feel like, yes, we don't know if the villain's defeated, but it's Superman, so he's going to defeat the villain. But it left us with a
See,
lack of resolution that
but
almost just feels like they ran out of time.
right, but see, I think respectfully, I think that's where you're wrong though, because we don't know. But based on the comics and the sort of the canon and lore, we sort of know, spoiler alert, that he doesn't win initially, right? Um, so there's that cliffhanger. Here's
To
what I've
grapple
sort
with
of said in
this
my mind.
season. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Here's sort of what I said in my mind. It falls flat on its face as a series finale. And basically, when they started making this thing, of course, no one expects or thinks that this is going to be their last season unless they go into the season knowing it. But you also don't know that you're going to get renewed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as a series finale, this thing was a disaster. As a series finale, it's freaking fantastic because you know there will be resolution.
Right.
Series finale, horrible, horrible failure. But
Do you think they would have aired it this way if it was the series finale?
absolutely, because we know that, unless somehow we find out later on that they filmed some sort of
Like
different
two cuts of
ending,
it.
right? Because we know that they filmed this months and months ago,
Hmm.
not knowing what their fate was going to be.
Right.
So, unless we get news, and if they did change some things, or if they did shoot two endings, we'll find that out. I don't know if anyone's asked that question, but I think this was sort of their vision: win, lose, or draw. It's sort of the same gamble that Legends of Tomorrow made, and they lost. Superman and Lois just happened to win,
Yeah.
um, and that changes almost everything.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought of even considering evaluating it as a potential series finale, just because by the time we see it, we know it isn't. But at the time that they shot it, they wouldn't have known that. I wonder if they would have at least cut it differently in some way if it was the series finale. Because there is so much in this episode, I can easily, we can kind of identify, okay, the Jordan and Sarah, scenes would have got cut and something else would have got put in at the end, and there would have been some sort of resolution, or somebody would have stepped in, or we'd get some kind of flash forward that would, in a, cheap and two
Right,
character way in a diner, recount what happens afterwards or something like that.
right.
We've all
Yeah,
seen that kind of thing too.
yeah. I mean, they did that with Stargirl when basically you get like the end credits, like not post credit sort of deal, but it was like, hey, things turned out well for our heroes, and they might have ultimately done something similar for Superman and Lois, but it would have been so much to wrap up with basically a title card that it still would have felt like a failure. Um, so
I feel like, and this is where I need Kate's video feed to reconnect so I can pick her brain on this. I think the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. finale was another example of one that we thought could have been cut different ways depending on if they knew for a fact when filming it that it was going to be the finale or whether we'd see these characters again. And one thing I didn't mention in the news at the top of this was I think we recently heard via, just social media or whatever that a quick cameo of Daisy's Quake was cut from a upcoming Marvel film or whatever. So I think there's often times, especially in a TV comic adaptation, whether it be DC or CW, where even if they're filming the end, it's not necessarily the end. They always have to leave a bit of a door open in case these characters ever pop up on something else. We're reaching sort of the end of that for the Arrowverse, in that, if this ends, there's nowhere else for anybody really to go. But I'm sure that would have had to be in their mind. But to that end, we know that in the upcoming season, we're really going to cut down our major cast of characters. And your theory last time we talked, and I'm sure it still stands, is that they're going to boop boop over to Metropolis. And we see sort of the makings of that, not necessarily for them, but for John, Natalie, and crew, including Natalie's young man, the whole thing. So I'm sure you're still confident about that theory. Who now do you think is not making the cut?
well, we know from, I think, from Dylan Walsh's wife that Sam Blaine will not be back. And that was sort of another sort of thing that was left. He was kidnapped by Lex Luthor, and we don't know his fate. So I'll say my expectation was that he's dead. And truth of the matter is, his wife said he's not, he didn't accept the offer to come back as quote unquote. Um, a part-time player, so I have to assume he's dead or missing or something along those lines. So I don't think he's coming back. Um, it's I think Kyle and Chrissy will get sort of like a check-in, and my
Quick,
expectation is that there
annoying
will, yeah,
cameo.
my expectation is there will be a time jump. They'll have their baby, and then that's fine for me because I don't. I know it's going to sound cold and callous, but I don't know that I like watching shows with babies on them. So
Agreed.
they pop in. They pop in. They've got a kid, and they say, "Hey, this has been fun." Then that's great. I think obviously um, Lana having a relationship with John Henry can still work for a few episodes because while he may very well be in Metropolis, he does have a freaking super suit that he can fly to Smallville in a matter of moments. So I still feel like their connection will be strong. I think they will be integral parts of the show. Um, but I think everyone else I think Indy said that she's basically going to be back and probably doing about 3 episodes, maybe more, depending. So, but to be honest, if I love the actress, but if they told me that her character was not coming back at all, I think how Jordan and Sarah left it, I think that's fine. She's continues to be in Smallville as a waitress. He's off in Metropolis doing Superboy things. I think that would have been a perfect place to leave their relationship. Um, so to answer your question very long-windedly, I think again it's easier for the Kents just to move to Metropolis and deal with the threat of Lex. It also gives an opportunity to sort of get more into sort of the Superman lore of, hey, he's a Metropolis person and not a Smallville person, and that sort of thing. So I think, and you can also bring in some characters who work at the Daily Planet and that sort of thing. So there's plenty of things that they can do to sort of phase in new interesting things while sort of phasing out the rest of the cast. And I think it should make for tighter storytelling. And they've got plenty of time to figure it out.
I agree. I'm excited for the move to Metropolis. I think a change of pace will do them well. I am excited at the foreshadowing of who will likely make it. I think if there's anybody other than Clark and Lois's family that I want to see over there, it's John and Natalie's family. The two are very tied in my mind, and I'm perfectly fine with leaving Kyle, Chrissy, Sarah, even Lana, but we'll circle back to a theory I have on that. And really just everybody else in, Smallville behind. I don't advocate for women moving for a man, but I do think that Lana could potentially move to Metropolis. And I'll tell you why. She's already sort of done all she can do for the city. Like she's serving her term as mayor, which is, generally for most people, I think like a couple year term, whatever. She can do her long distance dating. And then I just don't think she needs to stick around in a small town while her loser ex-husband is having another like baby with like the literal only other woman in town. Like it's just that's no. You gotta move
Yeah.
on to better and brighter.
And I think they did give Lana an out in that when she got visited a couple episodes ago by the governor. I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like the governor could say, you know what, I need like a regional person in Metropolis. Here you go.
Yeah.
And Sarah could say, well, you know what, I want to finish out high school here, and so you could figure out a way to have her like basically work during the week in Metropolis and get her weekends back in Smallville, and that way you still have that connection. And John Henry could give her a lift. Um,
Yeah.
so there's that. Um, I I don't know if you want to get into it, but how many episodes had you been waiting for that Lana and John Henry moment?
Literally since the first time I saw them stand next to each other. And this is why, like, okay, it's not about winning or losing, but Lana wins. Like, come on. Kyle is now carrying like never leaves his small town energy, like probably still has his high school like football trophies over the mantle. Lana's about to like move to Metropolis, end up with the literal hottest guy on the entire show. Like fantastic. Their chemistry immaculate. Tell me why there were so many sex scenes this episode. No, not a
Well,
complaint, by the way. Compliment, not a
well,
complaint.
here's the funny part, right? I was listening to and or watching because they're on YouTube now. I was watching Jeff's and Martin's pod, right? And some I think it was Martin who brought it up, but I was like I didn't pay any attention to it until he said it. But like in this entire show, particularly this season, all of the sex scenes have featured like basically like shirtless and almost nude dudes, and like the women have sort of been in the positions of power for the most part. If flipping that sort, because usually what you get is the woman in lingerie or whatever,
Mhm.
but they always flip it on the show. We get shirtless Clark or we get like shirtless John Henry. I don't know that we've ever seen like Lana or anybody in like anything other than regular clothes. It's just crazy. It's so
They're
fun.
rebalancing the scales.
Yeah, yeah,
Next season, they'll counterbalance it. Nobody will have clothes on.
yeah. So that's a selling point for Kate. So
A reference he wasn't even there for.
Kate, we also mentioned Agents of Shield,
Hmm.
Daisy, Quake. Yeah, there was a bit. There was a bit in there where we unfortunately cannot pick your brain. This is just me letting you know that you're loved and needed. I'm happy that you were able to return to us.
Hmm.
And you returned to us just in time, in fact, because there are two shows mentioned in tonight's title. We have Supes Lo that we just talked through, and I am so excited for the final season that they know is the final season of season 4. And we have an upcoming season, you know, in a couple years or whatever it is of The Witcher, which will be sort of the final ish season, maybe, of season 4, but it is actually currently the final season now with Henry Cavill. So this show's ending without ending. We got the first 5 episodes, which I think is the first time they've dropped half of the show's season at a time rather than all at once, which is kind of messing with me. But so far, I'm just gonna not bury the lead. I'm loving this season. What are your thoughts, Kate?
I am also loving it. So I'll be honest, from a like overarching fantasy action adventure fan, it's lacking compared to past seasons. I can admit it. It's not as big and bombastic and vibrant. Um,
Bombastic.
bombastic. But you know what we're really here for, let's be honest with ourselves, is Yennefer and
Absolutely.
Geralt. And
Yes.
when I say Yennefer and Geralt, I mean Yennefer. And because of that, like I there have been moments this season where I felt like the writing could have been better or lacking or lackluster, maybe in the first 2, 3 episodes. The second 2 episodes that we got were really paying that up, but the acting and the chemistry that was really compelling between the main couple basically made up for any of that for me. Uh, and I think that's why episode 3 has been kind of the weakest for me so far, was because it was the episode they were separated. It had some of the worst writing for me, and even still, overall was genuinely enjoyable.
Mhm.
So if you still can enjoy the worst episode, I would say that that's a good season of television.
The thing that I'm finding with this season is like, you know, I have a very one track mind. So I tune out
Hmm.
basically any storyline that's not directly involving Yennefer or Ciri, right? However, weirdly enough, any scene, even ones where I'm like kind of sort of barely following the storyline, don't really care, I'm still enjoying it. Like I'm still just enjoying like the world building and like, oh, you know, even like stuff I normally don't care about, like, oh, here's this monster on a ship that we have to defeat and what's their weakness, whatever. Like it's just like really well developed and intriguing and really doing something that I think a lot of fantasy shows struggle with, which is continuing to entertain those who are not like, I'm going to hardcore watch every single moment of this and learn every single character's names and know their entire like stats and history and stuff basically. Like it's still just keeping things entertaining at a fairly high level, which I'm loving, and it kind of sucks me in deeper to like, oh, wait, suddenly I am caring about these side characters. And like the romantic plots, both the Yennefer and Geralt plot, Yaskier getting a boyfriend, like the whole thing. Loving all of those, but also just like the characters in general. Even Ciri didn't really annoy me for more than like half an episode.
Yeah, I think behind the scenes I was complaining to Cammie at one point, and I was of course watching episode 3 while I was doing that, and
And then I was complaining right back.
then I got then it was, yeah, you're playing right back. But then after episode 3 it was perfectly fine, and then when watching episode 4 I was like, all right, they had to make her kind of insufferable in episode 3 so that she could realize that she was being insufferable in episode 4. I get it, like it has to happen. The big complaint I always have with Siri as a character is more that because of how long it takes them to film each season, her aging is not really
Yeah.
as linear as I would hope. And so when she was maybe a year or two older than her character in season 1, that was fine. But now she's significantly older than her character. And that's not like a diss against the actress or anything.
Not at
It's
all.
just
Yeah.
when that happens, I think the writers tend to start to lose grasp, and this is across tons of different shows, when the actor gets further and further apart from their young childhood age of the character, the
Mhm.
writing becomes even sloppier about what they're supposed to be,
Mhm.
and it can get a little more irritating to watch this person who's clearly in her 20s running around and making choices and mistakes that are of a 15-year-old child at the oldest.
Yes. And again, this is not, first of all, when I say, especially if I'm talking about a woman, that she looks like older or whatever, that's always a compliment. I think women look best in like their 40s, like 100%. This is not a knock. When I say that she looks like in her 20s, that's great. I think she's gorgeous, just an absolutely stunning actress. She does not look 15, but she is written to act 15. So we are now like firmly in CW territory of like, this is, somebody who could, be paying a mortgage and is acting like they're a sophomore in high school. With that being said, I do like that she is being written as, this sort of 14, 15-year-old level of like decision making, maybe even worse. Like, I think we all know like slightly more responsible high school aged kids, because she's a spoiled brat. She's been spoiled. She's been sheltered. She's a princess. She just escaped from all of that, slash, got, like she just got away from that. And there's just some things about, she may think that she has sort of this sense of absolute righteousness and justice, and she means well, but she doesn't understand downstream consequences. She doesn't understand people as a collective rather than an individual, which I thought was a really good touch, where she wants to save each individual person because she is not ready to kind of think as a leader of the collective, of the human experience, and not everybody is like her.
Well, and when I can take a step back, I can appreciate that it is a thing that they use a lot in Hero's Journeys anyways, but it is a interesting concept from a girl who, I mean, from the moment we met her, is a spoiled brat. She is kind of petulant. She has this like, but I want to attitude about her the entire time. And then she's thrust into this situation where she's being told that she's all powerful
Mm-hmm.
and is going to be the greatest hero of all. And that's setting you up basically for these crazy expectations. I have to save everybody. And the best way for you to conceptualize that, especially at a 14, 15-year-old age, is I save every single person I come across without like understanding the consequences. That while that consequences rant of hers about how consequences is a coward's excuse to not act will live rent free in my head for far too long. Um, it does make sense. It's just there is something about it that has a cognitive dissonance to me that comes off as irritating and frustrating. And
Yeah.
I think it just has to do with like how long this has been going on with her, like how obvious the mistakes are that it's almost to a point of ridiculousness.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like we're seeing her personality come out more this season, but in doing so, we're finding both more to love and more to not love. So, for example,
Mhm.
between episodes 3 and 4, we really saw her learn from her mistake fairly quickly, especially for somebody who is, obstinate and doesn't have a history necessarily to learn from. So that's nice to see. But even just seeing that I have to save people, or kind of I'm the center of my universe, as we would expect. That's like the literal psychology of a teenager, whatever. We still have this bit to dislike until she truly, if and when we truly do see her as like a young adult, and then eventually, a queen or what. I don't know. I haven't read the books, but I can infer.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on the degree to which they have Yennefer and Gerald working together as parents versus working separately as parents, and whether that's an emotional choice, a matter of necessity. Is that balance good for you so far?
I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I've enjoyed it. So I don't have anything big to pick at. I think, to be honest, that period of time in like episode 2 to 3 where they separated
Mhm.
on their separate missions was a detriment to the pacing of what they were going for. I think episode 1 set up really, really well. And then it wasn't until episode 4 that some of that paid off. Um, but I will say that I'm glad they didn't give Yennefer an immediate forgiveness, all is clear, forgiven, all is clear, because that would be insincere to Geralt's
Yeah.
character. And I'll say sometimes in the past I felt like Geralt was very one note.
Mhm.
And it's a lot of times I think they give him the very much like overprotective, big brooding guy, which yes he is, but I have to say I think they almost gave him even less lines and just gave him more stand here and emote.
Yes.
Stand here and feel things. And it made him more dimensional in a way, and I really appreciated that because you got to see how caring he is for innocence. And that could be in part because of how much he's been around Ciri and how much he feels responsible for her now. But that was an interesting development just with the standing around watching. There was so much character development in him not doing anything.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
the thing is, going back to, I think it was at the beginning of episode 2 or the end of episode 1, Yaskier talking about, Geralt is a hammer, so all problems look like a nail, which is an analogy I'm sure we've all heard, like outside of this show as well. And I think that setting that up at the beginning of this season, we're very slowly starting to see actually a progression away from that for him, where he's starting to think more long term. For example, he's starting to see some flaws in Ciri, but he's also reinforcing in her, like, you will be a good queen, you will be a good leader, while she's objectively not yet demonstrating those skills. But he's thinking beyond just that. He's explaining to her, like the importance of humanity. Like, yes, we can take money for jobs, but humans are real. You can't take a life unless it's an absolute last resort. And, just kind of trying to teach her things in ways beyond the means he uses in his, day-to-day interactions with conflict. He is not just there to be like, there's the trope that we always talk about of like the big grumpy dad character who's like sheltering, some little girl through the apocalypse. And there's like 5 million movies of that because like everybody has daddy issues or whatever, right? He's not just doing that. This is certainly an example of that trope, textbook example of that trope, but he's not just doing that. He is also teaching her means beyond just the physical fighting. In fact, I don't think we've seen too much physical training of her beyond or in comparison to the emotional training. And the emotional training, importantly, is not just coming from Yennefer. Yennefer is not just there to train her and mature her emotionally. She is there teaching her practical magic as well. So that's a parenting thing that I'm appreciating, that it's not like, oh, dad teaches you all the fighting and mom teaches you how to emote. Like there's a split.
Yes. Well, and kind of to go back to you talking about the hammer analogy, I've never really felt like he was a hammer. We keep being told that he's a hammer, and I've never really felt like it actually. But even this season, and I think they did it on purpose, where they set him up to be even more boorish and foolhardy, I guess, than he ever has been, as a way of segueing into, and look how he's grown, look how he's changed. Because I think he pulls his sword like maybe half as much as he's ever done in any of the previous seasons.
That's what she said.
And that has a lot, that is what she said. Part of that probably is because there is so much going on this season, but the other part of it is he has kind of chosen to talk his way out of a lot of situations.
The theme of tonight is
which is kind of
references about shows while the listening third party cringes and wants to be anywhere else other than here.
I wouldn't wholly say that.
We haven't even talked about the tantric lesbian sex scene.
Yeah.
Wait, this is Netflix, right?
Yeah.
It is, but it was sure something. Great. 10 out of 10.
It was something.
It's...
Yeah. But then you got episode 5, so can we really complain?
Can I confess I haven't seen episode 5? I just finished episode 4
okay.
like 30 minutes ago.
Okay, then I won't spoil it for you, except know this at about 5 seconds after the first hit, and you'll know what I'm talking about. I went, I know what's going on! And I kind of woke everybody up in the house.
I'm just picturing you, like screaming at the TV, and they're like, "Everyone, calm down." It's just Kate watching her shows again. It's fine.
Yes.
I will say,
Yeah.
Laura's dress at the end of episode 4. I really hope that makes an appearance in episode 5, and I trust that it does.
Which one is it? Is it the cutout?
The cutout,
The
yeah,
yeah, that's the dress she wears the entire episode. It's the entire
fantastic.
episode.
I am thrilled. Will I know the plot of episode 5? Perhaps not, but I am so excited to watch it. It's a great dress.
Oh,
Well,
you will knowing you will not know the plot of episode 5.
do they release these episodes each week, or do they release them in a batch, like at a certain time?
That's a good question. So they drop the first 5 at the same time, and the next 5 will drop July 27th, which I think is an interesting choice because it's a little different than Netflix's previous release schedule, both for this show and for other shows. So, like, for example, I watch a lot of Netflix garbage, like Love is Blind and The Ultimatum, whatever. And when they do split it half and half or third, it usually is 1 week apart. So, like, for The Ultimatum, they drop like, 4 or 5 episodes, and then a week later they drop 4 or 5 more, whatever. It's quite a gap for this one.
My
Let me
guess
ask
is
you
it's a
this
numbers
question.
game.
Yeah. Get people to sign up for an additional month.
Yeah, it's a month and
Well,
two
no,
days. So
because in my head I was thinking it sort of speaks to the conversation we were having earlier. I'm wondering, and I'm pretty sure they don't, because it would be like impossible to do. But if you release it separately, and depending on how much time is in between when you release the first batch and the second, is there any ability, I'm wondering, for them to say, hey, we shot for the second half of the season, we shot sort of variations of what we wanted to do for each sort of point, right? So based on the first half and feedback that we get from the people who watched it, do we put in scene A or do we put in scene B for how we sort of shot this based on what the audience's reaction is? I'd imagine that's probably too many moving parts, but I'm trying to also think what other reason could there be to sort of not just release it either weekly or just all at one time?
At the very least, it can influence the marketing. So even if that 5 week span is not enough to do massive editing changes, and 5 weeks is enough to do editing changes, by the way, because Netflix has edited already released episodes like overnight when they've wanted to. If there's been an issue, I think they edited like a Stranger Things incorrect birth date out one time. There's been scenes that they've chopped this, that, or the other after the fact. So let's not pretend, like, you're right, 5 weeks they could absolutely choose a different ending, especially if they were like waiting on a renewal decision or cut a scene, whatever. But at the very least it could influence their marketing decisions, because if certain characters, particularly new characters for this season, are resonating better, or there's a certain relationship people are rooting for, or we like this or the other, they'll just market that a bit more when it comes time to do like the 72 and 48 hour pre-promo for the second release. I would guess. I'm not a marketing professional.
Mhm.
Kate, what are your thoughts?
That
um,
makes
my thoughts are just that it's a numbers game and it's that they can get you to subscribe for another month because it's one of the biggest shows. But I really quickly wanted to ask you how you felt about Robbie Amell playing what surprisingly a fantastic and interesting character and then him getting killed off.
Listen, it threw me because we talked about iPhone face, and he has the face that's seen in iPhone. And especially with the styling of a lot of characters, not just him, this season, I felt there's this specific styling where I'm like, not only does it feel very 2023, it feels very 2023 referential to early 90s. And I was starting to wonder, like, is this intentional? Are we trying to evoke like 90s, like vampirism, fantasy? I'm thinking like The Lost Boys, Buffy, I'm not sure what. Like we literally had like girls like had slash have girls who are whatever, courtly, whatever in this fantasy realm who have like the 90s
Mm-hmm.
side straight bangs. You know what I'm
I,
talking about? Where I'm like, this is
I was
a very
thinking,
specific styling choice.
The Knight's Tale, the
Yeah.
Heath Ledger movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like
There was occasions where
from the late 90s, early 2000s.
hmm
Yeah.
but yeah, his character was surprisingly good and interesting. I find myself liking this show for a lot of reasons, but one of my favorite things about it is there's tons of characters on any side of the war that you like.
Yeah. Agreed.
So you don't really root for a side in the war. You're like, I like you, but you are against this other person I really like, but that's fine. Just like don't hurt each other. We're good.
Right.
And he's one of them that I was really surprised that I liked him so much so quickly, and then he got killed off. But I also was really enjoying him trying to do that deep gravelly voice because Steven had done that deep gravelly voice for so long. I was like, I see what you're doing. I know what you're doing.
One thing about this show, everybody goes in and out of accents 100% of the time. There's not one character, not one, who's maintained their accent this entire time. But it doesn't really distract me from like the, fantasy setting or whatever. Like so often they're going between certain people groups or certain, this tribe and that court and this land and that whatever, that you could almost naturally interpret it as like, oh, if they, like I can't remember who, I think it was Yennefer, don't burn me at the stake, who like randomly slipped into like a full Irish accent for like a full sentence. I don't know what happened there. It was like in episode 3.
Whenever she gets a little more sincere, her more like Northern English or whatever, she's an English actress, but whatever English accent she has, it comes out more pronounced.
There was
Whenever
like
she's
some
getting really
Irish
sincere.
or Scottish that just like came over, but all
Yeah.
of them have this, or it just sort of like switches between lands. And I see that as something like it's kind of part of the mystique. It's like, where are we? Are they code switching in a way that I just as a viewer don't know? And like realistically, no, it's just the accent is inconsistent, and same with Robbie's performance as well. But it's done in such it's fun. The season's been fun. It's been fun without being comedic. That is hard to nail. Fun without doing one-liners and like laugh beats. Wild. That they've nailed, but keeping this sort of like fantasy and the, when they're what Siri was complaining about, the drunken ladies and this, like it's just, it keeps things upbeat, even as we know, like Vanessa Hudgens' voice, yeah, like people are gonna die or whatever. So great. Carey, you need to watch this show. I really like it.
So here's the question that I had earlier, right? So Cavill this is his last season, right? Or whatever the case may be. Do you anticipate that they will change? And probably not, right? Because you're just swapping in another character, another actor, right? But do you anticipate sometimes it happens where you start incorporating more of what's natural for a particular actor, and you incorporate that into the character to a greater degree? Do you anticipate any sort of significant changes, or maybe just more subtle ones, or none at all?
If we get multiple seasons of Liam Hemsworth acting as it, I could foresee some subtle or even longer existing changes, but I doubt it's going to last more than a season without Henry Cavill. So I doubt that very many Liam eccentricities are going to make it in. That's my thought, though.
I don't think Liam's going to like make the character his own, and I think that that's fine. And I don't exactly know, and Kate could probably speculate better than I about this, what the transition's going to look like. Are we going to have some sort of like Ruby from Supernatural situation where like, oh, somebody stabbed Geralt's face and he's like bandaged for the first 2 episodes, or he's a shapeshifter, or a demon took over his body, or it's his long lost twin. But I don't know if they're going to explain it some way, or just like assume that everybody else in the audience is like me and can't tell like men who look like default video game characters apart. It's fine. But Henry Cavill really was like a fantasy. I'm not talking about him in the past tense like he's dead. Henry Cavill presently, he's like a fantasy nerd, and he's really into like this sort of fantasy stuff and Dungeons and Dragons and like all this kind of thing. And like he really brought his own perspective on like fantasy and world building and like a wealth of experience about that beyond just his like acting ability, which is like good, but like he's employed because of his jawline more so than his acting ability, and like we can all accept that. But he does have some like hobbyist expertise in this world that Liam's not going to bring, and I don't think Liam was hired to bring. Like I think he's hired to carry this character across the finish line, and that finish line is probably just one season.
Yeah. To be honest, I think they could have found an actor that looked more like Cavill if they really tried, and then they could have leaned into like the
like 50?
time where he gets the scar on his face. Yeah. Somebody at least as old as Henry Cavill. I think there's a good bit of a difference in age.
They might
they don't look terribly similar.
There really could be something where it's like it's straight up not the same person,
They could lean into the fact that it's The Witcher, but there are many Witchers, so it's just a different The Witcher. And I've had that thought, but it also kind of would be going completely against the source material, but then they've never stuck to the source material, which is why he's leaving. So I don't know.
They're like, if you don't like us going off script, we'll go more off script. So
more off script.
And then it's just a bunch of 5-year-olds throwing a tantrum. Stormy in the chat says, hi, everyone. Hi, Stormy. Tell us what you have been watching this week. Stormy says DC certainly found an actor who looks like Cavill. Yes, we are very excited. Well, I'm excited about the Lois Lane casting. I just wrapped up watching the final season and a half of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, so that was perfectly timed right as I was done crying over how much Midge and Susie love each other. We get announced that she will be Lois Lane, so I'm thrilled.
I need to catch up on that one.
Are you behind on Maisel?
I'm so behind on Maisel.
Oh my god, you're gonna love it. Save it for like a rainy day. It'll like cure your mental health if you ever need it. I mean, or like therapy. I don't know. Don't listen to me. We only have a couple minutes. And I will just briefly talk about what absolute garbage I've watched the last couple weeks. So I already mentioned Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is the only thing that wasn't garbage. I have been watching Charity season of The Bachelorette. Charity is just by all accounts prior to going into the season. So if you guys know against your will how The Bachelor Bachelorette works, whoever the next Bachelorette is usually a girl who is a contestant on the previous season of The Bachelor. Whoever the next Bachelor is usually a guy who was previous, contestant on the last season of The Bachelorette. And it's just this toxic cycle, whatever. So they picked this girl, and she's like a marriage and family therapist. She is from Georgia. She seems extremely like just mature and emotionally well regulated and put together. She also straight up looks like a Barbie, just like so gorgeous, right? And like go Google her picture, you'll see what I'm talking about. Looks like a Disney princess. And I'm like, okay, that's lovely, but this is not going to make for good television because she's not messy. Like, she's going to make good choices, and she's going to like teach these guys to emotionally self-regulate. It's going to be the most boring season ever. No. Despite all of her like emotional intelligence credentials and experience with therapy, she just has the wildest case of a broken picker. She is just drawn to the most awful, toxic guys, despite her brother coming on and being like, this guy has bad intentions, and other guys being like, this other guy said this, and somebody else saying, like, just she is just drawn like a lightning bug to what I don't know what a bug to like whatever to the world's most garbage men, despite like not even based on attractiveness too. Like there's guys who are like straight up 10s, and then there's like somebody who's like holding on to a 6.5 for dear life and is also the worst person you've ever met, and she's like that one, the 6.5 who's wearing dangly cross earrings and looks like he just stepped out of a frat that he was kicked off of for being like 27. Like it's just absolutely wild to see somebody who's so brilliant and wonderful go for the worst guys ever. I really hope she gets it together, but not before the end of the season because this is very entertaining. I also started Indian Matchmaker, and I want to switch careers and become an official matchmaker. So more on that story at 11. Great show. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for joining me. You guys can go chat with Kate and Carey about The Witcher, Superman, and Lois, or really a billion other things. Their information's in the description down below. It's their Twitter information, but Twitter feels like it's on its last leg, so maybe I'll swap that out at some point. I don't know. And we will see you all. We're skipping the next live show, so I'll see you all in one live show away from. I'll see you at the beginning of August, and we'll be chatting about the next half of The Witcher and other things. Bye.